So here's what's really interesting. And you mentioned Pugh Brothers Garage. We're going to talk about that the next time. But there's in Menifee County, Kentucky, is the part of that area of Kentucky. Everything once you get it, like Frenchburg is the county seat, 700 people. It's very small, and it sits kind of down, I guess you'd say, in a valley. And then as you continue east, everything goes up on a ridge. And if you go all these roads, you're from Dan Ridge, and actually Mom is from Big Woods, which is the other side of Dan Ridge. Melanie, my wife, is from McCausey Ridge. Our cousin Richard lives on what, Bird Ridge or
Kendrick
Ridge, and there's all these ridges, and these ridges are where they go up on top of the ridge, and they build a road that winds around along with the ridge. And if you go to the right or the left, there's going to be a cliff you come across at some point, which is just kind of an interesting topographical point about that part of Kentucky. So you didn't grow up on Dan Road, you grew up on Dan Ridge, and and it's just a really interesting. So if you're from any other part of the country, that would be an interesting thing about coming to visit where you grew up. So everybody kind of left that area of the coal mines of Eastern Kentucky, hardcore Appalachian Eastern Kentucky. It came more towards the central part of the state and what would be probably considered the foothills of the Appalachian. It's culturally a little different. Menifee County, Letcher County today is culturally different. I've spent time for work in all over the state, and topography is different. And so when they went from Letcher County to Menifee County, like you said, they farmed sorghum and so forth. And then the family moved into this garage business. We'll catch up next time. But man, the next thing I was going to say, what I was going to say is, now there's another interesting part of this story of the Pugh legacy as it's gone from Wales into, Menifee County, Kentucky, mid-40s, early 40s or late 30s, whenever it was. And that is that there was an adoption within the family. And someone was a Burton and got adopted by a Pugh. And so if you were to go by our true bloodline, we're not really Pughs at all. We technically would have been Burtons had it not been for this adoption. So there's a story there. What's the story with that?
I wish I knew. The only thing I know for a fact, and that's from sitting and listening, and the Burtons side of the family used to come and visit every year, every summer. And that's what they did, sit on the porch and talk about those things. And I don't even know who those Burtons are now. I don't know if there's any living. And if they are, I wouldn't know where they are. I don't know. But Paul Pugh's parents evidently passed away. And his aunt, Pugh, adopted him or took him in. I don't even know if there was adoption back then. Took him in, raised him. And they gave him a choice. Now, this is my understanding. Do you want to go by the Pugh name or the Burton name? And he said, they're taking care of me. I'm going to go by the Pugh name. That is my understanding of that whole thing. And I don't know anything past that, actually.
So is is there a possibility that any of that is just, it's no tail, or is it like
no, it's fact. No, JP's told me that many times.
So Paul was actually born what was his first name again? Calvin Burton.
Yes.
And so
Yeah.
the Pughs were his aunt
Right.
married a Pugh.
And I don't know that connection. I just don't.
So we really aren't tied to the Pughs out of Wales. We're tied to the Burtons, who,
Yes.
who are also Welsh.
Yes.
And so it's kind of the same story, even though it's Burtons. It's
The Burtons and Pugh in Wales back in those days, from what I understand, were back then. It's like it used to be here. Families settled in communities as a family. You know, like the Pughs on Dan Ridge, they settled close together. And that's the way I understand it was in Wales. You had the Pughs and Burtons all one family, basically, in a community, a coal mining community. So I can only, and it's been so long since I've looked it up, wouldn't know where to start now. That's in my memory from back when I did some research on it.
yeah. So the other thing I was going to mention is what's really interesting. This is where I lost my train of thought a moment ago. Is if you go back, why I started talking about ridges was this, and I completely lost my train of thought. If you go back, several years back, and you drive out Dan Ridge, you drive and you see, oh, there is a log house with black painted logs and thick white seams of whatever the filler between the log and I don't know, it's concrete or whatever. And then you go, oh, there's another one. You drop, there's another one, and they all look kind of the same. And those were the Pughs homes, and they didn't look like everybody else's homes. I don't guess. Maybe they did, but when I was a kid, they were the only homes that looked like that.
Yeah.
So what was the deal with that they built their homes like that? And first,
for the Pugh, and if other Pughs ever hear this, take it as it's meant. When a Pugh did something, I'm talking about 40s, 30s, 40s, 50s. When a Pugh did something, all Pughs did something. If a Pugh cut the timber off their property and built a log house, the other Pughs cut the timber off their property and built a log house. If a Pugh, like JP had always heard,
you moved from Letcher County to Menifee County, all the Pughs moved from
exactly. That's exactly. They were a community within their own family. And it was that way through that whole generation. And then I guess in my generation, it's gotten away from that a lot. Completely, probably. But back in the old days, if one Pugh got a television, all Pughs got a television. When the JP supposedly had the first one in the county. I don't know if that's true or not, but I always heard that. Well, it wasn't long until the rest of the Pughs had a television. It wasn't long at all. And that was a Pugh thing. That might have been a lot of people's thing back then.
Yeah,
because
part of the time.
Because every family did things together because they had to. Like Paul Pugh always raised hogs. Well, when they had a hog killing day, every one of them Pughs was there. Every one of them. Even me, and I had a little bitty toddler. And they all had a job. And he raised great old big killing hogs, and they'd kill 2 or 3 at a time when it'd be frosty. frost on the ground, and but they all done it together, and that's the way they did things. I guess the old, I don't know. Well, you had to survive.
Yeah.
One man couldn't kill 3 or 4 hogs for a whole family.
So one of the things that I guess is my sort of take, and I could be wrong on this, but just as I've kind of, because if anybody is watching this that doesn't know who we are and is just randomly watching this video. So you grew up there in Menifee County, but when you got married, and this will be a whole nother video, you moved to Louisville, Kentucky. That's where I grew up, but all my family's from Menifee County, and we spent a lot of time in Menifee County. So it's like a second home to me. So I had a window in, but just thinking how things would have been in my mind's eye when I think back to you were growing up, I think this is kind of how I see it. And I don't know if this is right or not, just curious. I see it like this family of Pughs moved in from the mountains to a culturally different Menifee County, and then they were just kind of different, like they built different homes, they did different business, they did like how much of that is accurate? Like they were just kind of they just kind of stood out a little bit in everything that they did back in the 1940s, or is that just my sort of dramatic interpretation of it?
Well, I'd never thought of it, but maybe because I remember when everybody in the county just about came to my dad to weld something, because he's about the only welder there, and the garage was the garage in the county at the time. There's a couple more there, but that were busy too. But he was busy. I hadn't thought about the houses being different. There's a few other log houses that kind of depended on if there's pine trees growing where he's going to build a house. I guess one thing. But those what you just said, I hadn't thought about that, but it's still that way. There's still a lot of migration out of eastern Kentucky coming to Menifee County and to Clark County, where I live now. A lot of migration. And a lot of those people have a different skill set, have a different mindset, and it's changing the complexion of the Menifee and Clark and everywhere. It's changing that complexion still. So probably you're right, and probably the people that came before them had some impact too.
But I broke into the Pugh thing.
I
broke into the Pugh. They had
Oh yeah, Joanne just pointing out there hadn't been a lot of Pughs marry in Menifee till me and her married.
Yeah. She was the first crazy one to marry a Pugh.
No, I don't think she's the first, but
and a few years later, Melanie followed suit with me.
It was different. I mean, her family and our family is about the same, but it's different too. It's different for her when she married the Pughs. But they did go in a direction that hadn't been gone very often before when they moved there.
Yeah. So just to kind of summarize, we don't really know exactly when our Pugh Burton migration happened, but it came from Wales. Now, one thing I will say is what's really interesting. I grew up in Louisville. I was born in '69. Louisville's a very diverse city. But when you go to the part of the country where we're talking about in Eastern Kentucky, here's what's really interesting. In Menifee County, think about our family names: Pugh, Burton, Welsh. Um, I think Conley was your mother's maiden name. Conley,
Yes. Yes.
English or Welsh or Irish or something.
Yeah, it's in that group.
Mom's maiden name's Brewer, which is English, and her other side of her family's Hamptons, which is English. Melanie's Conways, Spencers, Mackenzies, Farrells, all Irish, Scottish. That part of the country, this is really interesting, is 100%. You know, we have a cousin who was your sister married a Murphy. Like from that county, everything was within the British Isles, settled there. You know, from which is really interesting. And our family name is all Welsh, and the family ended up as coal miners, as a coal miner family. And then I don't guess any of your grandfather or his brothers were in World War I or II, were they?
Not that I'm aware of.
Support, because of the support, because coal fueled
Yeah.
so much of the war. And then eventually around I guess early 1940s, they moved to Menifee County. Your dad continued to work in the coal mine until he broke his neck, and then came back. And then there's a whole nother start of history once they got into Menifee County. And then your dad's sister ended up, I believe, in Somerset, Pulaski County, and instead of Menifee County, but the rest of them all ended up in Menifee County. And so what we'll do is we'll talk about really super interesting story about the Pugh Brothers garage. The next time I'll say, it's kind of funny. I'm wearing, because we're talking about Eastern Kentucky, my White Lightning t-shirt, which I just noticed as we're in here. White Lightning is another name for moonshine, which is not what this shirt's about. This is a roller coaster named White Lightning. So, that's why I have a White Lightning shirt on. It kind of goes appropriate with the moonshine area of Eastern Kentucky back in those days. So anyways, we'll follow. Is there anything else in this particular video that you think would be interesting, just on this whole migration of Welsh miners into Kentucky?
I can't think of anything.
So, all right, we will shut this one down, and then come back for another one to talk about Pugh Brothers Garage. So
Okay, that will work.